This video is a little bit different than what I usually do, so sit back, relax, and maybe grab a drink and enjoy. This story takes place on the Saiyans planet 1,000 years ago, way before they were the population killers who put fear in the entire galaxy, in the era of King Vegeta. In the ancient times, a big ape walks. He doesn't even know that he's one of the ancestors of the powerful Saiyan race. The animal is only looking for his next meal. Unlike his prehistorical equivalent in the real world, the Homo sapiens, he doesn't have a stick with a rock, not even a stone. But we can see he's reached a certain level of evolution as he's wearing some very badly sewn together pelts. Suddenly, he jumps in the air with an impressive leap. He falls right beside a huge herbivore, 25 meters long, 50 tons on Earth, but 600 tons on this planet. The animal gives a start and gets ready to flee, but it's too late. The predator has already pounced on his back. With a powerful blow, he crushes his victim's spine, as the Homo gorilla sapien tears off a limb right away to eat it raw. In spite of the beast's size, he only eats the tender parts. He then abandons what's left for the scavengers. He wants something more sophisticated. His steps lead him into a forest and he smells those little animals that he loves to munch. He slowly goes between the trees, before stepping on a branch without noticing it triggering a trap. With a clever rotation system, an entire trunk at the end of which is tied to a huge rock is rushing at him. Thanks to the speed of the rotation, the club has reached an incredible speed, and this gigantic club falls down on his head. The Tuffles had a hard time putting this trap into place. Such a big rock doesn't move on its own, especially on a planet where the gravity is 11.65 Gs. Unfortunately for them, this Saiyan is strong and fast. He has time to place his arms in front of him before the impact. He's thrown several dozens of meters away and his body goes through a tree. His arms are bleeding, but he's alive. He foolishly smiles at the smell of his own blood and walks again, without paying attention to the several metal turtle shells that are tied to the trap and ringing as they bang on another in a deafening noise. The metal turtles evolved until they had smooth and shiny shells, much tougher than reinforced concrete. Even Saiyans couldn't eat them. They couldn't get their fingers in the small gaps from which the beast's head and paws come out, and they couldn't tear the shell open. And when they hit it, they could only deform it without actually breaking it. The Tuffles, in some millions of years, will build their first weapons with iron, creating the crowbar, and this will allow them to finally open them up. Until then, they had no predators. For now, they just burn the turtles and use their shells as a musical instrument. In a glade, the Tuffles can hear in the distance the alarm bells. They panic. They're far away from the camp, so they start running. Though it's too late, the predator has found them. He's twice as big as they are. The last members of the group turn back, pointing their ridiculous weapons towards the monster. Sticks with sharp flint, clubs made of turtle shells, and thorns of giant thistles. The flint spear is thrown at the ape, but sees it coming and has plenty of time to send it away with the back of his hand. Once he reaches them, he laughs at the blow the Tuffle threw at him with all of his strength. Another stabs his thorn into the Saiyan's belly. The ape's skin is scratched and he groans. The Tuffle laments that he hadn't poisoned his weapon prior. It may have saved him. Luckily for the group, the Saiyan isn't that hungry. He's content with only eating 3 of these rear guards. After this, he goes back home in the plane. In this place, 2 Saiyans are lazily lying around digesting their meal, and a child is having fun breaking rocks, making a noise that doesn't seem to be annoying the sleeping apes. One last Saiyan is sitting, looking into the distance. We could imagine that she's thinking about the meaning of life, wondering if there's a god, or at least wondering if it was going to rain. In reality, Saiyan is wondering why the grass is moving back and forth, whereas the wind always blows in the same direction. To which, she inwardly answers, "Grumph." This answer seems to be as satisfactory as the modern-day equivalent of, "Bah." Our Hunter Saiyan from before passes by the youngster and without warning kicks him in the ribs. The kid falls about 4 meters away screaming. Contrary to the sleeping ones, our hero finds his racket to be unbearable. He comes near the thinker and drops the pelts of the Tuffle he has eaten wore on his head. We understand then that, at this time, the Saiyans don't make their own clothes. They simply steal them from the Tuffles. Proud of his gift, the Saiyan says, "Grubov," which is interpreted by the other as, "We copulate," to which the latter answers positively in the sense to where she hasn't punched him in the face. And so lived the prehistoric time. Saiyans, Tuffles, metal turtles, brachiosauruses, and many others more or less happy. Jumping forward to only 2,000 years ago, the Saiyans are watching the nightfall. They're smiling because tonight they celebrate. The children come out of the habitations, which primarily consist of a bunch of sticks and pelts. They leave the village and go to a far-off meadow. Everything is quiet. Most of the animals are hidden in the very back of their dens. They know what is about to happen, and the Tuffles know even better than they. That's why their habitations are carved into the depths of the ground, far, far away from the Saiyan territories. In the middle of the group, a young kid is looking proudly at the sky. As like the other children his age, this is the first time that he's going to see a full moon. Its particular cycle allows it only to be full once every 8 years. An adult shoves him. The child slaps back, sending him hundreds of meters away. Indeed, this child is already the strongest member of the village. His name is Braska. The sky clears up and the moon appears. All the Saiyans take the light into their eyes, and they start to grow, to change. In a few seconds, they've all become gigantic apes. The Saiyans look down at the world at least 50 yards higher than usual. Everything seems so small. They let out a roar with this new power. They start running, stepping over hills with glee. A baby prances around. He's smaller than the others, but he already towers over the tallest trees of the forest. In spite of his size, he doesn't feel heavy and laughs as he runs between the legs of the adults. Somewhere else, a Saiyan who has kept their humanoid appearance is crying. The others must not see this. What a shame! He had lost his tail in an accident some years ago. He had hoped to have it grown back in time, but that hasn't been the case. Entire forests are destroyed. Thousands of beasts are crushed. The landscape is devastated. But when Saiyans party, they party hard. A scream can be heard in the distance. Everyone turns around. They see Braska suffering from a strange phenomenon. His muscles are swelling and he screams as if he were in pain. Wind is starting to swirl around him, as happens when the most powerful Saiyans that exist in their time concentrates to gather their full energy and destroy anything that moves. Ape starts to float in the air, a power that none of the others have seen. He keeps gathering energy and floating higher. A huge whirlwind surrounds him. Suddenly, the color of his fur changes. He starts to shine and becomes yellow. The sheer level of his energy makes all of the villagers fall. Braska is suffering. He keeps getting more and more energy. Suddenly, he opens his mouth and spits a fireball so powerful that for centuries and throughout the galaxy, nobody else managed to make one that strong. The ball goes right through a mountain as if it were butter. On its way, the trees bend and touch the ground because of the shockwave. A Saiyan that is in the way is destroyed as if he were a mosquito in the path of a blaster shot. The fireball seems to go towards the stars, but actually, it merely goes straight forward and away from the bend of the planet. Its power is so that it's not affected by gravity. It gets lost in space, possibly to one day end up in a star. The now golden ape pounds on his torso to show his fury. He then grabs his own tail and tears it off. Returning to normal and losing consciousness, he falls and crashes onto the ground. On the neighboring continent, hidden in the depths of the mountains, a civilization with underground cities so the Saiyans can't find them. The Tuffles have watched this sudden rise of energy, and they worry. They decide to send out their spies, even though they have simple firearms that can shoot, pointed and poisoned bullets, even vehicles to ride on, albeit very loud vehicles. They at least give them an advantage of being almost as fast as a running Saiyan. The Tuffles are frightened by those apes who wouldn't hesitate to eat them. The next day, Braska arises rather late and has a bit of a headache. Nothing happens for several weeks and he doesn't remember what happened that night. But one evening, during a quarrel triggered by a very lively conversation about some uninteresting topic, a brawl breaks out and Braska kills one of his opponents. It's not the first time he's done such a thing, but the others are angry with him nonetheless. They all try to gang up on him, but they're easily beaten. They get back on their feet and try again. The tension rises when one of them has their arm ripped off by Braska. All of this is quite normal among the Saiyans. Far from here, on a tree hidden in the leaves, two Tuffles are watching the scene through binoculars. Other Saiyans join the fray. Among them are very powerful fighters. The chief of the neighboring village focused his energy, making the grass swirl around him. It's time to show this kid what a true warrior is. Braska recognizes the strength of a real fighter and lets go of the Saiyan's face he was crushing between his fingers. He opens his hand and a fireball appears. Some recognize it as the thing they saw the night of the full moon, draw back instinctively. The chief looks at the shining ball with interest, then runs to his opponent. Braska throws the ball as if he were throwing a rock and it hits the chief in a loud explosion. The chief stops running and falls backwards. He gets up in the smoke with his clothes torn, blood trickling here and there. This has angered him. He rushes once again at Braska, who's charging up another attack. This fight goes on for a while. The witnesses, Saiyans as well as Tuffles, don't say anything. It's obvious that Braska has the upper hand. On the ground and almost defeated, the chief of the neighboring village spits out a bit of blood. He's devastated. He hasn't lost any fight for a long time, so he gets up and focuses his energy. He lands an incredibly strong punch to Braska's torso, but the latter doesn't even parry or move, as if he hadn't felt the blow at all. Feeling the energy rising inside of him, an endless blast of wind surrounds the pair as his hair stands on end, his Saiyan mane turning straight and yellow. golden aura with some kind of green enlightens them. The Tuffles are astonished. After a moment of awe, they turn on the energy calculator. The hand turns around several times and starts shaking and oscillating. It's immeasurable. They use the binoculars once again to see what this boiler will do, referring to Braska. It's generating more energy than their coal plants. The boiler seems to teleport itself. In truth, Braska moves in one fluid movement right in front of his opponent and punches him. Blood spurts and he falls, dead with one blow. With a wicked smile, he turns to the others that are beginning to run away. He licks his bloody hand and chortles. He opens his arms and his energy keeps rising. He creates another fireball and throws it to his feet. The ground opens and explodes. The entire meadow is destroyed. The spies tremble seeing that the damage almost reached them. It only stopped a few yards shy. Braska turns his eyes in their direction. He spotted them. Though the Tuffle spies are trained, even since the dawn of time, Tuffles have lived in cooperation. Since the dawn of time, when facing a Saiyan, there is only one thing to do. Since there are two Tuffles, one of them has to stay back to face the enemy and hold him off while the other flees. Both of them jump down from the tree. Stretching out their right arm, they look at each other's hand. One of them's making a hand sign of scissors, whereas the other's making the sign of rock. They had rode their bikes that they had used in silent mode up until that moment. They trigger the starter and let loose the acceleration. The rockets fire up and each of the spies goes in the opposite direction. One of them rushes towards Braska, unafraid and ready to die. Yeah, he should be. Just before contact, the Tuffle abruptly turns to pass by the fighter's side. Surprised by the reactivity of the machine enemy, Braska looks at him getting away in a cloud of black smoke, making the warrior cough. The smell of pollution is unbearable. He deploys his energy and all the smoke fades away. He rushes forward and in one moment catches up with the machine that was surely going at least 200 miles an hour. He grasps the motorcycle and crushes the metal of the body, flying away with his prey. The Tuffle is pulled in every direction, but he holds on. He takes out his gun and shoots at point-blank range at the chest of his enemy, who seems to be taller and more muscled than earlier. The bullets only bounce off of him. These were the most powerful of Suferian ammunition. They should be able to penetrate the Saiyan body. They're worth over 100,000 zenny per unit. The fighter crushes the motorcycle and a leg of the spy along with it. The latter cries in pain as he bends into two, but also tries to reload his gun as fast as he can, though the results are the same. "I know what you're thinking," then says the Saiyan, pointing at the forest. "We could see the fumes of the engines of the other motorcycle between the trees." The spy eventually notices that they're now several hundreds of yards above the ground. Braska once again creates an energy ball and throws it into the forest, sending it after the other vehicle. The fireball destroys every tree standing in its way, and the target hears a suspicious noise from behind. He turns around to see the blast arriving at the speed of sound. He makes a 90-degree turn and switches off the engine when he's smashed. But not by the fireball, rather a thicket of bushes. Due to the explosion, bits of rocks and trees scatter around the area, a fragment of which stabbing the Tuffle. From high above, Braska wickedly laughed. Then turning towards his hostage, he sees him pulling the pin off a round gray item, yelling with sheer rage. The Tuffle clinches the Saiyan, placing the grenade close to his face. A detonation rings out as the explosion triggers the other grenades he had on his person. The motorcycle is destroyed as well as its user, but the fighter comes out of the smoke scratchless. A moment later, the other Saiyans return, but in an entire group this time. Other villages have been deserted to see what's going on with all these explosions. The fleeing Saiyans raised alarm and the others have come to help, hoping for a thrilling fight. But it's a battlefield. Steam comes from the burnt ground. There are remnants of something made of a strange metal. And in the middle of it all, Braska is standing, who is now twice as big as he usually is. He has become a mountain of muscles and the child is now bigger than all of the other grown Saiyans, bathed in his yellow aura and his eyes seeming to be white. It was a rather impressive spectacle. A lot of Saiyans died that day. The Tuffle spy somehow managed to bandage his wound and get back to the coast. There, a boat was waiting for him hidden in a cove. He had to report what's happened. In the following days, Braska kills dozens of Saiyans, destroys entire landscapes and comes dangerously close to the Tuffle's hidden cities. An extensive research into the archives show but one result of what this man is. 1,000 years ago, the first Saiyan with yellow hair was noticed. He was much more powerful than the others and died at a young age. This was only soon after he had initially changed. "It's clear," says a scientist. "It's a reoccurring phenomenon, and it keeps improving. Nothing seems to be able to touch it. It sucks up all the energy around him. It's indestructible and untiring," mentions another. "We have to destroy him, otherwise he'll destroy our world. If nothing can physically hurt him, we have to attack in another way." "Toxic gas? Poison?" No. Gas can't reach him because of the wind he generates, and I doubt poison would go through his skin. As for making him swallow some, let me remind you that ever since he's turned into this? He hasn't eaten or drank anything. The problem is solved, suddenly said someone. All the scientists turned towards the messenger who had just come in. Braska died this morning. He fell on his own, destroyed by his own energy. With the Tuffles, as with the Saiyans, this was a huge relief. Do you think such a thing will ever happen again, Chief? Asked a Tuffle during the entry of data for future use. Yes, he answered. In 1,000 years. And it'll be even more stable then. He won't die before weeks maybe, perhaps even more. It will destroy this world because his power exponentially increases with time. In 1,000 years, we will have the technology to destroy it. I hope so, thought the Tuffle. I hope so. Jumping forward in time another 1,000 years. The Saiyan and Tuffle world had changed. The Saiyans hadn't evolved much, but now at least they built houses made of wood, stone, and cement. They even had some towns, schools, a standing army, and a world king of all Saiyans. Indeed, when you can go around the planet in less than a month, the world is your only country. And yet, civilization was still quite rural. And even though there wasn't a class system, the inhabitants of the few cities had a higher level of education. They were stronger and even more polite than the average villager. The Saiyans were now aware of the art of flying, and a part of the population was even able to do so. Every adult Saiyan now knows how to throw fireballs, or they work hard to keep it hidden if they don't know how to do it. As for the Tuffles, they've gone through the industrial era and are now in the informatics era. They built robots that could silently fly, protective force fields and sensors, and are able to watch over the entire planet. Those technologies were very useful to them to survive on the same planet as the Saiyans. Tuffle cities were now in open air, on islands far away from Saiyan lands. A big part of the surrounding oceans were included in the protective shields which disconcerted beings from coming near it. The beings that would lose their sense of direction and get lost. They'd always just end up going back home without finding even the smallest Tuffle town. Although the Tuffles did keep in contact with the King of Saiyans, and the rare educated Saiyans. To achieve this, they sent a robot ambassador which enabled them to have video conferences. The most peaceful Tuffles considered the Saiyans to be their baby brothers. They felt they had to watch and protect them. For instance, this is why they sent spy satellites and warned the Saiyans a bit before a volcano erupted and destroyed an inhabited region. And of course, they warned the Saiyan King of what they now call the Millenary Fighter, and of its danger. The story had become legend among the Saiyans. Everyone had hoped their own son would become this Millenary Fighter, because in the Saiyan Kingdom, the most powerful is the one who rules. The current Saiyan King had then made arrangements to welcome and kill this fighter. He had scoured the ranks of his army and trained them to their limits. He didn't neglect a single soldier who may turn out to be this warrior, which is why he'd send out certain men on senseless quests. Such was the hunt of the golden metal turtle, that according to quote, legend, could make anyone immortal, or research of a mystical demon that could kill anyone just by touching them, or the search of a hidden Tuffle city that held an incredible weapon. The Saiyans were quite skeptical and didn't believe in the aforementioned legends. Most of them had a hard time just believing in the Millenary Fighter. The king himself didn't really believe in these either, but he did believe in what the Tuffle library could hold. Very few Saiyans knew how to read. Actually, in order to know how to read, those Saiyans had to be weak from the get-go, even cowardly to the point they hid under the protection of the king. Those were the ones who would manage the Saiyan library. Whenever a high-ranking Saiyan went looking for historical information, which seldomly happened, he would admit that the scribes were of some use, but couldn't help but feel contempt for these bugs who spent their life among books. Studies and scientific projects had been conducted by Saiyans, who are considered to be more cowards than bugs, and their findings had previously been kept secret. However, the king knew they were important, and an attack against the library meant death. The people had eventually come to accept that, yeah, these scholars are garbage, but they are of some use. The great and retired General Nezushi was in the great library of the capital. He was certain that it was of no use, but obeyed the king, and he was one of his most loyal men. He had waited for several minutes and started to feel like it was taking forever. There, said the scholar who had come back, a Saiyan woman who was even older than he was. She had lost several teeth and was so hunched, it was a wonder that he could even see her face. For the general, she was nothing more than trash. I found the documents, those about what a Saiyan has to do to reach supreme strength. Yeah, so? It's a study of Leonard. He lived 200 years ago. He said that Saiyans used but a part of their power, and they could become much stronger. And the key to reach this level is empathy. What is this empathy? The ability to feel for others, to share their pain, to be sad for them and, she added, to suffer when they suffer. That's completely idiotic. The scholar read and explained all of the details of the theory. After several long conversations, Nezuchi left. He had understood what his mission was. He had to find this empathetic fool and make the strongest fighter in the world out of him. Nizuchi explained this to the king, who sent him in search of this empathetic warrior. Therefore, the general left and traveled from village to village, all the while thinking that this was a waste of time. But the king was right. They couldn't rule out a single Saiyan. Several hundred miles away, a Saiyan had actually found a golden metal turtle shell and tried by all means to become immortal by rubbing against it. And then he understood it was merely covered with a yellow mud. Far away, far from the city and from everything else, a Saiyan woman was dying. This happened every day, but this one wasn't old or wounded. Actually, it was worse. She was sick. A very pathetic way to die for a Saiyan. But that wasn't going to trouble her husband for even a day. It was a lovely early afternoon and he had things to do as chief of the village. But as he passed in front of his own house where his wife was taking so long to die, he yelled through the door, "Get out here, damn it!" Which may have appeared a lot more awful if you didn't know that at the bedside of his wife was her daughter who was crying out for her mother. The chieftain, whose name was Arditz, was quite tolerant. He understood that a Saiyan could cry, in particular if the Saiyan was young. A Saiyan could cry if he had a severe injury or after a bitter loss. But crying because of their mother dying, that he couldn't fathom. Everybody died sooner or later. "Get out here! Get out here now!" he bellowed. The girl eventually left. Her eyes were still red and puffy. "Are you not ashamed to make your mother suffer during her last moments by showing her your crying face?" he interrogated. "You don't understand anything," she replied, frowning. "That's right, I don't. Make yourself useful and go hunt for something to eat." The girl started floating, rare in these parts of the world, and flew away. Her father entered the house. He and his wife had been together for 20 years. From the Saiyans in this era, that was quite a lot. Of course, they had parted ways from time to see other people, but they had always come back together. They had together raised their daughter for many years, even though most kids were raised by only a single progenitor, and generally by the whole village. Entering, his wife was awake. "She's being hard on you, isn't she?" he asked. "It doesn't matter," she weakly answered. Arditz fell silent for a while, then asked, "Don't you want to put an end to this?" "No," she replied. "I want to see death coming." She was a true Saiyan woman. It was almost evening and most of the Saiyans were sitting at tables drinking and resting in front of their houses. Tables and other living places were almost always outside. After all, houses were only useful to sleep and to keep things out of the rain. All of them turned when they saw their chief coming from his house, with his wife in his arms. They had understood that she had died at last. She had been sick for several days and the Saiyans weren't used to seeing people taking so long to die. "Hanasia!" Arditz screamed to call his daughter that he knew was close by. Instantly springing from between the houses, his daughter was beside him. Her look was anxious and her eyes watered when she saw her mother. Arditz took a deep breath and he threw his wife's body high into the sky. Out of respect for their leader, all of the villagers fell silent as they watched it rising in the firmament. Arditz had thrown her as high as he could. This was a means the Saiyan used to show respect for their fallen. And the longer he waited, the more he increased this display of respect. Clenching his fist, he gathered his energy, and so did Hanasia. As she was starting to fall back down, all the villagers gathered their energy too. They moved away from their tables, ready to shoot. This was the moment they usually did it. But of course, they waited for Arditz to fire first. Her body was still falling, faster and faster. Some now becoming worried, for the deceased that were despised when alive. The tradition was to fire as soon as the body had been thrown, without giving it any time to rise. But to touch the ground, that was even worse. Saiyans were too matter-of-fact to think it'd bring misfortune or anything. All of it was a matter of respect, warrior to warrior. Neither Arditz or Hanasia could bring themselves to fulfill this tradition before she was mere inches from hitting the ground. Although, this was the deepest respect they could offer her. The empathetic Saiyan. Nizuchi visited village after village. He hadn't found anyone of interest. No incredibly strong peasant, no Saiyan that was crazy enough to like birds, flowers, or children. He had felt he had been to about 100 villages when he finally reached the place we had just left. He was then very far from the city of the king. In such remote places, it often happened that the authority of the king was contested. Actually, the authority of the king had to be renewed each time he expected anything from a faraway place. They had to subdue the villagers and remind them how strong the capital was. For indeed, many generals went from village to village offering Saiyans to join their army. But that hadn't happened in over 300 years when a king decided to go attack the Tuffles. Today, the king was training an army to face the millenary fighter. Even though it wasn't quite official, it was an average-sized village and had well-kept houses and organized structures. This meant an intelligent and efficient chief. Nizuchi went down and landed on the border of the village. Coming in on foot, he'd go towards the village center. With his bright and shining armor, he didn't go unnoticed, which was his goal after all. And all of the Saiyans watched him or followed him. As it often happened, he was stopped dead in his tracks by an audacious girl. A young Saiyan female was in his way and clearly trying to defy him. After all, the man had come on his own volition and hadn't been invited. And he was obviously rather old, so she took her chance. She spat on the ground in front of him, hardly noticing her opponent's hand rushing towards her. The attack reached her shoulder and she was thrown backwards. As the villagers began to laugh, he went on his way. Raditz had noticed the commotion and was waiting for him in the middle of the village. When the leader saw his armor, he immediately recognized his function. "You are a great general of the king. Welcome to our village." He hadn't always been welcomed this way. This chief was clearly more educated than the others he had met along his travels. They prepared a banquet as fast as they could and began to discuss with this newcomer. They couldn't talk without eating. Nizuchi directly explained that he was looking for a student, a fighter to train. "That's an honor we cannot refuse," said Raditz. "Would you like to try out some of our warriors here? Those who you think show potential." "Well, you're the chief. Show me the strongest one your village is worth." Raditz hesitated for a second, then got up before he swallowed his last piece of meat. Claiming the most powerful to be himself, it was mere minutes into the battle before he thought himself thrown to the ground for the 4th time by the general. He got up, brushed off the dust and the blood, and returned to his stance with dignity. Standing in front of him, Nizuchi hadn't been touched once, astonishing the villagers. They were very proud of their leader. They knew their leader was really strong. He had crushed the other chiefs in the surrounding villages whenever problems arose. But this city dweller defeated him without problem. "You're very strong," said Nizuchi. "It's surprising in such a faraway place. You've traveled a lot, haven't you? I fear you're not the one I'm looking for. I think I'm going to kill you." As he slowly created a fireball in his hand, the spectators were now holding their breath. Killing someone in a friendly match wasn't really polite, but they didn't care enough to intervene. He didn't plan on dying like this. The warrior rushed his opponent with rage and attacked him. Now motivated, Raditz was much more efficient and Nizuchi took blows and let go of his fireball. Yet the general managed to get the upper hand and broke free. The two opponents were now facing each other from afar. And while Raditz was hesitating, Nizuchi was looking into the crowd for the Saiyan that would come to stop this fight. Because killing during a friendly match is only thinkable by the empathetic Saiyan. And given the wide gap between their levels, only a coward would kill someone this much weaker than him given the conditions. It was an interested girl who reacted. Since his wife had died, she desired to take her place and become his new wife. "He's not the strongest of the village," she said. "Really?" replied Nizuchi. "Maybe there is someone who deserved more to fight me. Or who would deserve to be killed," condescendingly retorted Raditz. Nizuchi pondered upon what these words could mean. The girl wanted to save the chief and pointed at someone else, while the chief, on the other hand, seemed to want to keep the someone else hidden, fear that they would be killed. "Killed? It depends. Most likely, actually, yes. And if it's not that other person, then it shall be you." This placed Raditz back into his fighting stance. "None here stronger than I." Nizuchi smiled inwardly, for the sentence was clearly a lie. He was protecting this other person, just as the girl was protecting him. When a Saiyan was helping another, it was either because they obeyed that person, such was the case for high-ranking officers or mere submission, or because they deeply loved that person. In all of these cases, when they faced a death threat, the Saiyans always changed sides. Except, as he had understood in the library, when it was a strange being who couldn't bear the pain of others, and whose strength came from the motivation to protect him. So all he had to do was spice things up. Turn towards the girl, ready to defy her. But she was gone. Raditz took advantage of this moment to attack with him distracted. The fight restarted anew. Nizuchi received some more blows, but the chief eventually hit the ground again, dominated by the city fighter. He was about to kick Raditz some more, even though he was clearly defeated, when an angry voice interrupted him. "Stop!" shouted a different girl. The one who had left had brought her. This newcomer had immediately made an impression on Nizuchi. Because of his long life as a warrior, he could easily guess the strength, level, and experience of others. He would judge this based on the way they stood, the tension surrounding them, or the look in their eyes. There's no doubt about it. She is the strongest of this village. But if that's the case, why isn't she the leader? He could only think of one reason. "Leave my father alone!" Yes, the only reason possible. It happens in faraway villages that the parent isn't disposed of by their child, at least not for many years. This father was protecting his daughter. "One of you will die. Which one will I fight?" "Me!" The father and daughter responded at the same time. Nizuchi gloated. Apparently empathy is hereditary. Something attracted his eyes. He turned towards the girl to analyze her and noticed her eyes were red. She had even been crying recently. Saiyan customs changed depending on region, but Nizuchi had never witnessed any place in the world where a Saiyan would dare show their face in public with such weakness. "Why did you cry?" the city man asked her calmly. "That's none of your business," she answered as calmly in return. "It interests me because it could change my mind in regards of this killing. If you tell me the truth, of course." Hesitating, she utters, "My mother is dead." So I cried because my mother is dead." Nizuchi didn't understand this. In his opinion, as in every Saiyan's opinion, the death of a next of kin could lead to light depression, and only at best. He looked for the link between this and the suffering of others. Deceased didn't suffer because they were dead, so it seemed better to focus on her hidden powers for now. "I defy you. If you can't stop me, I will kill you and your father." Hanasia ran towards the stranger and tried to punch him, but he dodged it. She attacked again and again, and Nizuchi didn't do anything besides calmly dodge and parry each blow. The general was quite impressed by her strength. It wasn't bad at all. He eventually hit her hard, but to his surprise, she dodged it. He thought that as he hadn't attacked in a long time, she wouldn't have expected that, but obviously she has some sharp reflexes. Nizuchi kept attacking, and soon enough, Hanasia found herself in a bad position. She had never fought against such a strong Saiyan. It wasn't a matter of power, but he was evasive, fast, and efficient. His attacks almost always reached their target. His moves were beyond understanding, and his way of fighting wasn't that of the village, or even in the way of the neighboring villages. Hanasia was finding herself short of breath, so Nizuchi considered it was time to test her again. "Tired already? I thought so." Moving blindingly fast, he threw a fireball at her father. As the chief was staring at his daughter at the time, he noticed too late that he was the one being attacked and didn't have time to react. Raditz was thrown backwards in the explosion and fell to the ground, heavily injured. When he turned to see the reaction of the girl, he saw her furiously rushing towards him. He didn't have any time to parry, and for the first time in the fight, got a truly powerful blow. He was thrown backwards and some drops of blood fell from his wound, causing the general to smile as he hit the earth without reacting. So glad to have finally found the Saiyan he's been searching for so long. He was pinned to the ground by another violent blow, landing punch after punch to his face. He shouldn't have lost concentration as he had. He was now against a wall and couldn't react anymore. Impossible. Nizuchi now believed he was going to die because of his mistake. Oh, Hanasia eventually stopped and let him go. She could have easily killed him. Actually, given what had happened, it was surprising that she hadn't killed him. He had clearly threatened her father. It was logical that she should finish him off, especially considering he's still much stronger than her. He could always just come back and go through with his threat. And even though the villagers also thought that she should have killed him, they didn't say anything. "I won!" declared Hanasia. "I forbid you to threaten the inhabitants of our village." "You're letting me live?" articulated Nizuchi between his painful teeth as he looked at the sky. "You really are the one I'm looking for." There was a moment of surprise, and then Hanasia turned around and walked away to her father. "Are you okay?" she questioned. Raditz didn't answer, given how stupid her question was, and how sick he was of her asking it. He got up off the ground. He was dizzy, but he'd get over it fast. "I respect your decision, but it would have been best to kill him." "Hey, old man!" she yelled in the other direction. "Leave! Our central place isn't a dormitory!" The villagers let out a chuckle. They laughed even more because they knew if the stranger was too injured to leave on his own, then Hanasia wouldn't hesitate to grab him by the hair or tail and drag him to the outskirts. Nizuchi slowly got up with what little dignity he still had, and he left the village. Once he was far enough, he looked for a watering hole to wash his injured face. In a few days, he'd have recovered, and he'd be back. When his mission had started, he didn't even believe in the existence of the Saiyan he was looking for. But now that he had really met with a strange being, he absolutely wanted to know if her power really could increase until it dominated all of the Saiyans. Many Saiyans opened their eyes wide at the sight of Nizuchi coming back to the village. He had to be crazy to do such a thing. He was still in such a condition there wasn't any grace in ganging up to attack him, but that's exactly what they were going to do. When the general of the king reached the main square, half of the villagers were already surrounding him, cracking their knuckles or merely standing with their arms crossed, looking at him scornfully. They were just waiting for the sign to attack. Not a word was uttered. Hanasia hastily arrived. "You again?" Nizuchi turned towards her and smiled. "Well, yes, me again. But I'm not here to fight. Rather, I'd like to speak to you in private." "You'll need a jaw in good shape to do that," she taunted as she went near him, fist raised. All the Saiyans in the village were quite wound up, ready to throw fireballs and come to Hanasia's assistance. As for Nizuchi, he merely went high into the air. All of the villagers were caught off guard as only a few of them knew how to fly. Only Hanasia went after him. I'm a general in the King's City. I have been the teacher for many Saiyans, and you, little girl, have a potential such I have never seen before. And that's why you came back? With my training, you will be the strongest Saiyan. Stronger than I. Stronger than the king. Clearly, Hanasia doubts this. Stronger than the millenary fighter. He doesn't even exist. Not only does he exist, but 1,000 years have passed since the last one. He can show up at any moment, and only you will be able to defeat him. You think so? My job is to think so. That's the mission I've been given. Hanasia gave him a strange look, seemingly annoyed, but she didn't feel like hitting him anymore. Her father would soon arrive, and now she had a decision to make. I thought your job was just to kill whoever you decided to. I lied. I was looking for a Saiyan to train to unlock his strength. Hanasia ponders on this. Several weeks later, Nizuchi was tolerated in the village and he gave lessons to Hanasia every day. A lot of villagers were there too. Some were there to help their almost leader if this almost outlaw was trying something weird. Others were there simply to enjoy the privilege of attending a fighting lesson from the capital. Ardie didn't attend often, but today he was there. Chief, said a Saiyan, didn't you crush Kumpin, the chief of the western village, with that technique? That's the one, he answered. I learned it in the capital. Why didn't you teach it to your daughter then? I taught her better techniques. Hey Hanasia, take his leg! The training went on. Quite a few Saiyans were watching and imitating. They knew that their leader, the strongest Saiyan of the region, was the strongest partly because of his travels and his training in the city. Ardie, do you think that Hanasia will be able to surpass that guy one day? That old man, he's terrifying. He dodges everything a bit like you, but 10 times worse. He's not really that strong, answered the chief. Not compared with... What? All city dwellers are that strong? No, kiddo. I mean compared with himself 20 years ago. He should have been really strong. You know, there aren't many generals. As for Hanasia, it is not impossible that she will reach the level of a general, but it is not certain either. Several days later, Nizuchi and Hanasia were alone at last. It was abundantly raining and the Saiyans stayed calmly within their houses. Rain was painful, even for Saiyan. It fell at high speed in a world where everything was heavy. Besides, it was so mineral dense, some drops were almost solid. It wasn't too uncommon that a badly built house was destroyed by the rain. A very small Saiyan ran from the village and towards the two others, holding a shoulder blade bone above his head as an umbrella. Little Henrik, what are you doing here? Asked Hanasia. I asked him to come, replied Nizuchi. I needed a hostage. A what? Exclaimed the two others at the same time, just as the general caught the kid and held him high, getting rid of his umbrella. Let him go, yelled Hanasia. He's too young to take the reign for that long. If you want me to, you'll have to show me your strength, my student. When the millenary warrior appears, I'm sure that the power you display when you want to help someone will show. But it will have to show much better than what you've shown me. With all of the training you've received, you better do something more impressive than last time. You want a good bashing, that's it? As the daughter of the chief, I'll protect the children of my village. I'd love to see that! Screamed Nizuchi, who at this moment threw a terrible fireball with his free hand towards Hanasia. As she wasn't ready, she took it directly and didn't see him flying in her direction. He kneed her in the stomach and she fell to the ground clutching the pained area. Move! Commanded her attacker. Do you think the millenary warrior will strike as weakly as I do? He then finished with a kick to the face, making the warrior roll backwards through the mud. Shaken, she could barely make out the figure of the Saiyan, but he was doing something. She heard Henrik's screams getting louder. Nizuchi was beating him. You know! He yelled so that she could hear him. I think he'll die! As he continued to hit the child, Hanasia tried to get up, but she was injured. The angered female managed to rise to her feet groggily, but slipped in the mud, falling heavily again. The unrelenting rain pounded on her wounds, increasing the pain she felt. Stop it! Stop! What are you saying? I can't hear anything! He yelled. This is how you protect your village! What a joke! He threw his hostage into the air and got him with a knee. Henrik screamed vainly and tried to struggle himself free, all the while restraining himself from calling for help. Stop! bellowed Hanasia as she got up and flew. She didn't feel the pain or heavy rain on her skin anymore. Her energy rose and rose again. She raised her fist, focusing on the indistinct black figure where the scream came from. Wind suddenly appeared and the drops changed direction around her, as if it were a storm. Damn, such power. But do you think the millenary fighter is going to wait? Nezuchi suddenly threw a fireball towards her. Surprised, she barely had the time to see it coming, and in a deafening noise, she fell again. That old man still had a lot of energy to spare. Hearing only the rain that was strafing her even more violently, Hanasia felt like she was about to pass out. Darkness was starting to invade her eyesight as a thought violently crossed her mind. Harik! It's impossible, she thought. I'm so tired. I can't move anymore. I can't stop him. Not like this. He's going to die. Little Saiyan, your savior is in no state to help, cackled Nezuchi sadistically. I think she's going to drown all alone in the mud, and you're going to have to join her. When he's hit with a sudden, powerful blow, right in the face like last time, he had neither seen or heard her coming. He didn't even know she had gotten up. This caused him to drop Harik with the might of the punch, but got a grip on himself immediately. He wasn't going to let her hit him again. Nezuchi flew to control his fall and put his arms in a defensive stance in anticipation of the next attack. Hanasia flew at top speed behind him and dealt a kick. He turned around and threw a fireball, but it crashed on Hanasia without damaging her any more than a raindrop. The general couldn't believe his eyes. There was a crater of mud at her feet. A supernatural wind surrounded her and her eyes were as hard as iron. Ah, he said pleased. Anger boosts you more than anything. But I want more! The general threw a punch, but she easily parried and dealt him another blow. He tried a sneak attack that he had learned in the capital, but she was too fast each time, and in each encounter sent him falling away. After a few minutes, Hanasia's power was still the same, and Nezuchi could hardly stand on his feet. She then slowly walked to him. He bent forward, trying to get into his fighting stance, but Hanasia caught him and threw him into the air. Using such power, he actually went flying through the clouds. Under the sudden sun, felt as though his eardrums were about to explode. The change in pressure was intense. On the ground, Hanasia picked up Harik from the mud, making sure he was alive. Now using her body to shield him from the rain, she took off. When they were near the clouds, she felt the usual buzz of pressure change and they slowed down. Shut your nose and mouth and blow, she said to Harik. He did as she said and it unblocked his ears. They went higher again and above the layer of clouds. In the sunlight, she checked to see how much the old man was injured. As he was now flying, he definitely had some broken bones, but at least had survived. You're super strong thanks to me, proudly said the little one as he spat out a baby tooth. She turned her head to see Nezuchi, who was wiping blood that was still running from his nose. He was looking at her with fury in his eyes, the same fury Saiyans usually see in the eyes of a loser. The look that meant they hated their opponent. He actually looked worse than the kid. Hanasia flew slowly towards him. I know what you're thinking, but there won't be a next time. If you ever come back to my village, I'll kill you, no matter what your excuse is. Nezuchi smiled inwardly. So even after several minutes of her anger, she still kept a bit of her boost. Indeed, she is just as powerful now as she was a minute ago. It'd be ill-advised to try to attack her now. Most surprising of all, yet again she had decided to let him live. Incredible, especially after all he had done. I'd have loved to teach you more, much more, but as you let me live longer, I'd rather go tell the king that I found the Saiyan girl who can beat the millenary fighter, and then I'll come back. Keep that in mind.